In episode number 5, we discussed temporary disability benefits and what triggers your right to temporary disability benefits and what are your rights surrounding those benefits.
Correct.
But we didn't get into how do you calculate your benefit, which is something that you're probably wondering if you've been injured at work and the industrial clinic or the doctor that your employer sent you to has taken you off. And now you're waiting for benefits from the adjuster. Maybe you've received a notification or you've received your check. You're wondering, hey, is this the amount of money I'm supposed to be receiving? It's less than what I normally get paid. Is this right? I need to live on this. Right. So that's the topic for episode number 6 of the Inland Empire Workers' Compensation Lawyer live stream and podcast. If you're a worker in California, you should be watching these videos and instructing and informing your fellow workers about their rights because injuries happen. So go ahead and smash that like button, share the contents of this video, and if you're a worker, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss out on important discussions about your legal rights. How are insurance carriers to calculate that rate?
What you do is you take the money that you made in the previous year, your gross amount pre-taxes, you divide that between 52 weeks. Once again, remember, this is the money you made for the year prior to your date of injury. And then after you have that, we'll do it with $60,000, okay? If you made $60,000 in the year prior to your injury and you divide that by 52 weeks, that gives you $1,153.85 a week. Okay, so that's your average weekly wage. Now, there's another step. After that, you got to take that, and people like to do it differently. What I like to do is I take that average weekly wage, divide that by 3, that'll give you a number, and then you multiply that number by 2, and that'll be the 2/3 of the weekly wage. You will get $769.23 a week of TD benefits. It won't be the $1,153.85. That was your average weekly wage. Now remember, your TD benefits are 66.66666 of your average weekly wage. In other words, 2/3. So your end payment, weekly payment would be $769.23 average weekly wage, which actually is still less than the max, right?
That's correct.
Because it was $60,000. Yeah. It's a pretty average salary.
Now, there are certain professions, certain unionized professions that have special rates depending on how you get hurt. So I know that the psychiatric technicians have a union, and if you're injured by a psychiatric patient that attacks you while working, this is often if you're at a state hospital and you're attacked, your rate could be higher than this. So if you work in a union, you're a longshoreman, maybe you're a police officer, there are certain types of injuries and certain types of situations where these benefits could be more than what we're discussing. But if you're a construction worker in California or a worker pretty much doing any job except for these particular union jobs, you're going to be dealing with the rates that my colleague George Abuado is discussing here on our podcast and live stream. What happens if you're working 2 jobs and you're injured at one of those jobs and it causes temporary disability? In other words, you get work restrictions that restrict you from doing any work for either of those jobs.
Yeah.
Now, there's a little nuance here to this issue. If you're injured while working for the higher paid job and it's that injury that causes your temporary disability, then your average weekly wage is the sum of all of your wages from both jobs. And that's what you use. But if you're injured at the lower paying job, then you take that hourly wage, and you use that wage and you apply that to all the missed hours. And now we're going to go through temporary partial disability, which is when you're unable to work for part of your schedule. You're missing some hours because of your injury. So temporary total disability, or TTD, is when your work restrictions take you off work 100%. You're unable to work, but sometimes there's reduced hours or there's modified duties that your employer will provide you, but there's not overtime. What happens if there's only partial disability? In other words, what happens if the worker is able to work some hours, but not all of their hours?
So here in our example, you were making $500 a week before your injury. Now in a different position, in a different capacity, you're making $300. That's a $200 difference. You take that $200, you divide that by 3, and you multiply it by 2 because it's 2/3 of that. And now you're left with $133.33 that's going to be added onto the $300 you're making. The insurance company is making up for partially lost wages. That's a partially lost wage that you're getting 2/3 of. So it'd be the $133.33 in this scenario. So now you add that to what you're actually getting paid from work.
If you find this content useful, please like it. If you have a friend or family member who you think would find it useful, share it. And if you're a worker in California, subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on important discussions that involve your legal rights as a worker in California.
I want to make a really good and important point and something that might keep you out of trouble, okay? And a lot of people might do this innocently, I want to say. Well, we'll go ahead and go with innocently, and they might not know. So this is your time right now. You're going to know. Make sure you do the right thing. If you qualify for temporary disability benefits and you're off of work, certified by a doctor, and the insurance company is paying you the correct amount and everything is fine, but you say, you know what, I'm doing okay, but if I work on the side, I can make a little bit more money, and that will maybe cover the third that's not getting paid to me by my employer because it's 2/3. And you just think, I want to supplement my income. Let me do a little bit of work. Well, I want to tell you right now that anything like that needs to be reported to your attorney. If you don't have an attorney, please let the adjuster know, because that has to be computed into your benefits, into your payment. If you don't, you could be having duplicative payments, and it could be fraud. Maybe you didn't intend to commit fraud, but there's a good way of getting caught for fraud if you're working another job or if you're making any other type of money through a different source and not letting the adjuster know, your attorney know. That could go really wrong for you. So make sure you're cognizant of that. Make sure you think about that. And if you do decide to take a job, maybe you can do a job that doesn't interfere with the restrictions that you have for your job that you're getting paid benefits for. But if you do take that job and you're making that money and you're not being restricted by the restrictions placed upon you by your doctor, make sure you disclose that, because all that money that you're making while you're on TD needs to be disclosed. It needs to be computed into the TD payment.
That's right. Disclose.
Yeah.
Work while you're on temporary disability.
Yeah.
Tell the adjuster, and if you're able to find work that's within your restrictions, although you're not required to go look for work, if you're able to find work that's within your restrictions, you have to tell the adjuster. So the adjuster is going to consider that when calculating how much temporary disability they owe you. So if you're working and you're finding a job that's within your restrictions, your right to temporary disability could be terminated.
Right.
If you're making enough money to cover as much or more than you were making before your injury.
And a tricky situation you could get into is, let's say you think no one's ever going to find out. Well, maybe they won't. But let's say you're selling items on eBay or Craigslist or OfferUp, and you're making some money that way. Well, when they take your deposition, which is most likely going to happen in a workers' compensation claim, it's not that they're singling you out. A deposition is taken on most claims. When they take your deposition, you're going to be testifying under oath, and they're going to ask you if you're receiving any money other than your benefits from the insurance company. Now, that's a problem for two reasons. Number one, you're going to have to disclose it. You're under oath. Number two, if you don't disclose it, now you're committing fraud and perjury. So you could be put in a situation to where if you say, you know what, I am making money on the side, and they're going to say, okay, well, why didn't you disclose that? Now you could have maybe a situation where you have to pay back some money, or if you don't disclose it and you lie about making money on the side, now you open yourself up to perjury, fraud, other stuff that you definitely don't want to deal with.
What about receiving state disability and temporary disability from the insurance company at the same time? You're not supposed to do it.
It's a no-no.
Now, I have had situations where maybe a day or two is overlapped and the client has taken that into their account. And maybe there's an overpayment on temporary disability for $100 or a few $100s. It's unlikely that the adjuster is going to make a deal out of a few $100.
Right.
Especially when periods are overlapping, you just pay the money back. So, don't get too concerned if there's a small overlap. Always speak to a lawyer if you have concerns. Yep. This is general information. It's meant to help you, but it's not legal advice. For legal advice, dial 844-984-84.